You became a billionaire the day they stopped calling silver an investment and started calling it a weapon. That shift happened quietly, in the back rooms of defense contractors, in the classified annexes of Pentagon briefings, and in the encrypted memos circulating between the Treasury Department and the National Security Council. While retail investors were still debating whether to buy another 100 ounces, the United States government was buying it by the ton, not for profit, for survival. Welcome to Silver Fault Line, where we don't just track the price of silver, we track the power behind it. And if you want to understand why 2026 marks the year silver became untouchable, you need to hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't speculation, it's documentation, it's policy, it's already happening. Let's start with something most people missed. In early 2025, the Department of Defense quietly amended its Critical Materials Supply Chain Report. Buried in the appendix, under a section labeled Strategic Mineral Reassessment, silver was moved from Category 3 to Category 1. That's the same tier as lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements. The same classification reserved for materials where a supply disruption could compromise national defense within 6 months, not 6 years, 6 months. That reclassification didn't make headlines. It didn't trend on social media, but it rewrote the entire game for anyone who actually understands how government procurement works. Because once a material hits Category 1, it triggers automatic stockpiling protocols. It unlocks emergency acquisition budgets. It gives federal agencies the authority to bypass normal market channels and go directly to producers, refiners, and even foreign suppliers if necessary. Now let's talk about why this happened. Silver isn't just shiny metal anymore. It's the most electrically conductive element on Earth. It's the most thermally conductive, and in 2026, it's in everything that keeps America running. Every solar panel relies on silver paste to convert sunlight into electricity. Every electric vehicle uses between ½ an ounce to 2 ounces of silver in its electrical systems. Every smartphone, every laptop, every server farm, every 5G tower, silver. The average data center uses more silver in 1 year than a mid-sized mining operation produces. And as artificial intelligence infrastructure expands, as more companies build GPU clusters to train large language models, the demand for silver isn't growing linearly, it's exploding exponentially. But here's where it gets darker. Silver is also in weapons. Lots of them. Missile guidance systems, radar arrays, night vision equipment, drone electronics, electromagnetic warfare systems. The AGM-158 JASSM, one of the most advanced cruise missiles in the U.S. arsenal, uses silver in its targeting circuitry. The F-35 Lightning II fighter jet has silver-coated connectors throughout its avionics. Every satellite in the GPS constellation, every military communications relay, every piece of hardware that allows the United States to project power across the globe relies on silver in some form. And there's no substitute. You can't replace silver's conductivity with copper in high-precision systems. You can use it, or you can accept inferior performance. And in defense, inferior performance means dead soldiers and lost wars. So when the Department of Defense reclassified silver, they weren't making a financial bet. They were acknowledging a hard truth. If silver supply chains get disrupted, America's military readiness collapses, not slowly, immediately. And that's why, in 2026, silver is no longer being treated like a commodity you trade. It's being treated like uranium, like plutonium, like anything else that, in the wrong hands or in short supply, becomes a threat to national survival. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. The United States doesn't produce enough silver to meet its own needs, not even close. In 2024, domestic silver mine production was around 33 million ounces. Sounds like a lot until you realize that US industrial demand alone was over 170 million ounces. That's a massive deficit, and it's been filled, for decades, by imports, mostly from Mexico, Peru, and Chile. But in 2025, something changed. Mexico, facing its own energy transition and infrastructure demands, started limiting silver exports, not banning them, just slowing them down, implementing quotas, requiring permits, adding fees. The official reason was resource sovereignty. The real reason was that Mexico's new government realized that silver was too valuable to just ship north without extracting maximum strategic leverage. Peru followed suit a few months later. Then Chile started renegotiating its mining contracts, inserting clauses that gave the government first right of refusal on all silver production before any could be exported. Suddenly, the entire South American silver supply chain, which the United States had taken for granted for half a century, was no longer reliable. And that sent shockwaves through Washington. Because if you're the Pentagon, and you're planning military operations 5, 10, 15 years into the future, and you won't guarantee that you'll have the raw materials to build the systems those operations depend on, you have a problem. A massive, existential problem. So what did they do? They started buying not through the open market, through strategic partnerships, through long-term contracts with miners, through direct government-to-government deals. The Defense Logistics Agency, which most people have never heard of, has been quietly locking in silver supply agreements with producers in Australia, Canada, and Poland. They've been funding new mining projects in Nevada and Alaska. They've been offering incentives to recyclers to recover silver from electronic waste, and they've been doing all of this off the books, away from the public eye, because the last thing they want is a panic that drives prices even higher. But it's not just the military. The Department of Energy has its own silver problem. The administration's climate goals require a massive build-out of renewable energy infrastructure. Solar panels, battery storage, grid upgrades, all of it needs silver. But here's the issue. If there's not enough silver to actually build the panels, the entire plan falls apart. You can't have a solar revolution without the metal that makes solar panels work. And right now, global silver production isn't keeping up with demand. In 2023, the world mined about 830 million ounces of silver. In 2024, demand was over 1 billion ounces. That deficit was filled by above-ground stockpiles and recycling. But those sources aren't infinite, and investment selling only works as long as investors are willing to sell. But in 2026, something shifted. Investors stopped selling not because the price went up, but because they started realizing what governments already knew. This metal is too important to let go of, and that brings us to the real reason silver became a strategic metal. It's not just about supply and demand, it's about control. Whoever controls the silver supply controls the future of technology. Whoever controls silver controls the future of energy. Whoever controls silver controls the future of war. And in 2026, the major powers of the world are in a quiet, undeclared race to lock up as much of it as possible. The United States is doing it. China has been doing it for years. Russia is doing it. Even smaller nations are starting to build strategic reserves. China is the perfect case study. For the past decade, China has been the world's largest importer of silver. They've been stockpiling it alongside gold, copper, and rare earths. Why? Because they understand that the next generation of technology, the stuff that will define the global economy for the next 50 years, runs on silver. Electric vehicles, renewable energy, advanced semiconductors, all of it needs silver. And China wants to make sure that when the time comes, they have enough to build whatever they want, and everyone else has to come to them to get it. That's leverage. That's power. Here's a stat that should get your attention. In 2020, China imported over 6,000 tons of silver. In 2023, they imported over 10,000 tons. That's a 70% increase in 3 years. And they're not using it all. They're storing it, building reserves, creating a buffer. Meanwhile, the United States has been relying on the market to supply what it needs, assuming that silver would always be available. That assumption is now dead. Let's talk about what happens when a strategic metal gets tight. First, prices become irrelevant. When the Department of Defense needs silver for a weapons system, they don't care if it costs $30 an ounce or $300 an ounce. They pay whatever it takes. Second, civilian industries get squeezed. If there's a shortage, and the government is buying everything it can, then the solar companies, the electronics manufacturers, the medical device makers, they all have to compete for what's left. That drives up their costs and in some cases forces them to shut down entirely. Third, geopolitical tensions escalate. If the United States needs silver and Mexico won't sell it, what happens? These aren't hypothetical questions. These are the kinds of scenarios being wargamed in Washington right now. Now, let's talk about what this means for the average person. If you're still thinking about silver as an investment, you're already behind. The smart money isn't buying silver to sell it later at a profit. The smart money is buying silver because they understand that in a world where supply is constrained and demand is exploding, having physical metal is better than having cash. Because silver is real. It's tangible. It can't be printed. It can't be digitally created. It can't be inflated away. And in a world where governments are printing money at record rates, where debt is out of control, hard assets matter. And silver is one of the hardest assets there is. But here's the twist. In 2026, it's not just about owning silver. It's about owning the right kind of silver. Not all silver is created equal. Silver in the ground, in a mine that hasn't been developed yet, is worth less than silver that's already been refined and sitting in a vault. And silver, that's in your possession, is worth more than silver that's in someone else's vault with your name on it. Because when supply gets tight and governments start invoking emergency powers, you want to make sure the silver you thought you owned is actually in your control. So what should you do? If you're rewatching this video on Silver Fault Line and you're re-wondering how to navigate this new reality, here's the blueprint. First, educate yourself. Understand why silver matters. Understand the supply and demand dynamics. Understand the geopolitical forces at play. Second, if you don't already own physical silver, consider getting some. Not as a get-rich-quick scheme, but as a hedge, as insurance. Third, pay attention to policy. Watch what governments are doing. Watch what mining companies are doing. Watch what China is doing. Because the moves they make today will determine the opportunities and risks you face tomorrow. And fourth, engage with this content. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Tell me if you agree or disagree, because this isn't just a video, it's a conversation, and the more people who understand what's happening with silver, the better prepared we all are for what's coming. So hit that share button. Send this to someone who needs to see it, because the mainstream media isn't talking about this. The financial news channels are still treating silver like a boring commodity. They're wrong, and the people who figure that out first are the ones who are going to thrive in the years ahead. Thanks for watching Silver Fault Line. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.